If you follow international news, you've probably noticed her in photos of world leaders. She often stands out in a crowd of men. For 9 consecutive years, she was named the world's most powerful woman by Forbes. She is German Chancellor and the de facto leader of the European Union, Angela Merkel. In 1954, Merkel was born into a pastor's family. Shortly after she was born, her family moved. At that time, it was still 36 years before the reunification of Germany. I'll give you 3 seconds to guess. Did her family move to East Germany or West Germany? The answer is East Germany. Back then, East Germany had a severe shortage of pastors. At the call of the church in West Germany, Merkel's father moved the entire family from West Germany to East Germany. Therefore, for the first 36 years of her life, Merkel lived in the German Democratic Republic, part of the Socialist bloc. This period had a very significant impact on her life. At that time, East Germany's control over religion was quite strict. Her father's position as a pastor also affected her mother's career. As a result, Merkel learned from a young age to be cautious in her words and actions. She was always able to control her emotions well and approach the world with a rational attitude. In high school, Merkel's grades were excellent. Her Russian was always the best in the entire school. Then in 1978, she enrolled in a combined bachelor's and master's program at Leipzig University. I'll give you another 3 seconds to guess what her college major was. The answer is physics. Contrary to what most people might imagine, Merkel's early career was actually on the path of scientific and engineering research. This also became a running joke that Germany produces. Physicists are truly amazing. Not only can they work on atomic bombs, pioneer quantum mechanics and relativity, they can also become chancellors. During her time at university, Merkel met her first husband, Ulrich Merkel, who was also studying physics. The two of them got married in 1977. Today, the name Merkel, which is so well known to people, is actually her first husband's surname. After graduating from university, Merkel joined the East German Academy of Sciences. This was the country's equivalent of the National Academy of Sciences. She was at the Central Institute for Physical Chemistry, working on her doctorate in physical chemistry. Her scientific research was quite impressive. In the top-tier international chemistry journal, JAX, she published several papers that were cited 15 times. While she was working on her doctorate, she and her first husband, Ulrich, grew apart and eventually divorced. After the divorce, she fell in love with her advisor, quantum chemist Joachim Sauer. This marriage has lasted to this day. I'm sure Macron would give that a like. After Merkel received her doctorate, she continued working at the East German Academy of Sciences until 1989. Just when she thought she was going to be a scientist for the rest of her life, a monumental event changed her destiny forever. In 1989, on October 9th, the East German government eased its exit restrictions. Tens of thousands of Germans smashed the Berlin Wall and crossed the border, heading to the other side of the wall, a place that for them was both familiar and strange. That night, Merkel also followed the crowd and walked the streets of West Berlin for the very first time. Everywhere she looked, there were crowds of people celebrating. She watched as people who had been separated for so long were emotionally reunited, hugging one another. Merkel was deeply moved by the atmosphere. Unlike her usual self, she had a lot to drink with her friends. The next morning, when she went to the institute for work, the hot topic of discussion among her colleagues had already shifted from science to politics. She felt like everything had changed. The tide of the era was sweeping every single one of them toward an unknown future. The dramatic changes in society awakened the political ambition that had been dormant inside Merkel for years. She didn't just want to be pushed forward by the wave of the times. She wanted to be the one standing at the crest of the wave. Soon she quit her job at the Research Institute and stood before the office doors of the Democratic Awakening Party, embarking on a completely different path. Merkel's political debut was hardly legendary. The Democratic Awakening Party she joined was just a minor party, and she wasn't given any important roles. She was often assigned menial tasks like going out on the street to hand out flyers. Her first formal job came about quite by chance. Some representatives from financial groups came to visit their party, but at the time Schnur was busy, so he casually asked Merkel, who was nearby, to meet with them instead. Back then, Merkel was still a complete nobody and felt she wasn't the right person for the job. But Schnur said nonchalantly, "From now on, you're the spokesperson for the Democratic Awakening Party. They're now you're qualified." It was Schnur's words that led to Merkel unexpectedly becoming the press spokesperson, launching her career in politics. This was her first time doing anything like this, but she turned out to be surprisingly good at it. She was clear and organized, answered every question, and highlighted the key points. This left a great impression on the reporters, and she started to gain some attention. In the last free election in East Germany, the Democratic Awakening Party was a great success. Although they themselves had very little funding, the electoral coalition they were a part of won a massive victory. As a result of this, Merkel caught the attention of East Germany's top leaders. She was chosen to be the press spokesperson for the last East German government. This experience, though it only lasted 6 months, was incredibly crucial for Merkel. She followed the Prime Minister, de Maizière, to many important international events, gradually coming to understand the basic rules of international politics. Having never been abroad before, it was a real eye-opener for her. She met many incredibly famous national leaders, including the woman who was at the time the political world's Iron Lady, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Fate is always full of dramatic twists. No one present at the time could have possibly imagined that after Thatcher, another woman in the room would in the coming decades have a profound effect on Europe and even the entire world. And in the eyes of the still unknown Merkel, Thatcher was like a role model, encouraging her as a fellow woman to rise to the highest levels of power. In 1990, when the two Germanys reunified, Merkel got very lucky. The Democratic Awakening Party she was a part of was merged into the Christian Democratic Union, and the CDU was the ruling party in Germany at the time. Merkel then prepared to run for a seat as a member of the federal parliament. In truth, she didn't even believe she could get elected. Before the campaign, she even went to the press office and signed an agreement, making sure that if her campaign failed, she would still have a job. But as it turned out, she miraculously defeated her opponent and became one of Germany's few female members of parliament. This caught the attention of German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Kohl was known as the father of German reunification for his work. During the reunification process, he made enormous contributions and was seen as a national hero in Germany. He was highly respected in the political world. He invited Merkel to meet him at the chancellery. The two of them talked for a long time. In the end, Merkel won Kohl's approval, and her career skyrocketed from there. Kohl appointed her Minister for Women and Youth. This took her from being an ordinary member of parliament straight into the cabinet. Her rise was unprecedentedly fast. That year, Merkel was only 36 years old, and she broke 2 major records, becoming Germany's youngest parliament member and youngest minister. You could say that Merkel's rise to a high-level position in politics had a lot to do with Kohl's support. But this also turned out to be a double-edged sword. The media and her political colleagues all looked down on her. In their eyes, the young and politically inexperienced Merkel only won Kohl's favor because she was a woman with an East German background. Even Kohl himself didn't seem to take Merkel all that seriously. He used to call her "my girl," which gave Merkel the first nickname of her political career, Kohl's Girl. This insulting nickname spread like wildfire, making people even more convinced she was just some window dressing by Kohl's side. In her early days in politics, the labels attached to Merkel were far more noticeable than her abilities. She was often ignored and underestimated, and she was deeply unhappy about it. She wanted to change the public stereotype of her. But instead of publicity campaigns or excuses, Merkel preferred to prove herself through action. She was dedicated to her work, especially protecting the rights of women and children. Even though she didn't have any children of her own, she was particularly concerned about Germany's youth. Thanks to her efforts, Germany passed an amendment to the Child and Youth Welfare Act. It guaranteed a child's right to an education and banned child abuse. She also introduced a series of legal measures to protect women's right to work and promote gender equality. After her 4-year term was up, Kohl promoted her to Minister for the Environment. The job was tougher, but it came with more power. This is when Merkel really started to show her political savvy. As soon as she took office, she made sweeping personnel changes, making sure she held all the real power in her hands. Soon another opportunity presented itself. In 1995, the United Nations held its Global Climate Conference in Berlin. As the environment minister for the host country Germany, Merkel made sure the conference ran smoothly. She was also key in pushing many of the negotiations toward real progress. The Berlin Mandate, which was signed at the conference, became the blueprint for what would later be the famous Kyoto Protocol. After 8 years and 2 terms as minister, Merkel was no longer a newcomer. She was a seasoned pro who had firmly established herself in German politics. But just as she was getting ready to make her next big move, her party, the CDU suffered a major setback. They lost the general election, and Kohl had to step down as chancellor. Naturally, that meant there was no longer a spot in the cabinet for Merkel. She was pushed out of the inner circle of power and became a member of the opposition. But worse things were yet to come. Kohl came under investigation for repeatedly accepting huge illegal cash donations. Other members of the CDU were also involved. The whole country was in an uproar, and the scandal just kept getting bigger. The CDU's approval ratings started to plummet. The entire party was bogged down in scandal. And just when people were still trying to process it all, just as German society was reeling from the massive shock, another even more stunning event quickly unfolded. On December 22, 1999, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung ran a commentary. The headline read, "Kohl is a liability to the party." The article bluntly stated that while Kohl had indeed created a glorious era, that era was long over. We no longer need him. What we need is to forge our own path. And the author's name in the byline was Angela Merkel. This article was a bombshell. It pushed the entire scandal to its breaking point. As the dust settled, people realized Merkel wasn't Kohl's little girl at all. He had personally brought her up through the ranks, and yet she stabbed him in the back at his most vulnerable moment. Beneath Merkel's quiet, unassuming exterior, a massive ambition lay hidden. Facing the scandal, everyone in the party was just trying to save their own skin, desperate to distance themselves from it. But Merkel sensed an opportunity, like a predator in the dark. She quietly waited for the perfect moment. Without telling a single soul, she published the article out of the blue. In a single stroke, she drew a clear line between Kohl herself and the CDU. The members of the CDU now realized that if the Kohl affair continued to escalate, the entire party could go down with him, and so they rallied behind Merkel. Seeing that the tide had turned against him, Kohl had no choice but to resign his position as honorary chairman. He left the CDU, the party he had dedicated his life to, and Merkel, in turn, was elected as the new leader of the CDU. As the head of the largest opposition party, Merkel finally no longer had to hide her ambition. She set her sights on the highest seat of power, German chancellor, a position once held by Bismarck and once held by Hitler. Every person who took that seat profoundly influenced Germany, but never in history had a woman held that position. Merkel rose to challenge that. Under her leadership, the CDU's approval ratings steadily climbed. The gap between them and the ruling SPD party got smaller and smaller. In the 2005 general election, the CDU narrowly surpassed the SPD. Merkel was successfully elected Chancellor of Germany. 1,000 years after the death of Empress Theophanu of the Holy Roman Empire, Germany finally welcomed a female leader once again. When we look back at Germany's history today, we find that there's something very special about this nation. They started 2 world wars. After being defeated, they were divided and sanctioned, and yet they were still able to reunify, surpass Britain and France, to become Europe's largest economy and biggest manufacturing country, and then go on to lead the entire European Union. This is something we should pay close attention to. And for a nation like this to elect her for 4 consecutive terms for 16 years as their leader, it shows Merkel is anything but a mediocre ruler. Even among Western countries, Merkel is considered a rather unique leader. Unlike those who are skilled at public speaking, are flamboyant, and have big personalities like other Western leaders. She dresses simply, is low-key, and chooses her words and actions carefully. She rarely seeks the spotlight, and seldom shows strong emotions. But don't be fooled. Beneath that low-key, unassuming exterior lies a ruthless, cold, and merciless side. When necessary, she can also unleash the commanding presence of a major world leader. Her aura is in no way inferior to any man's. She is rational, pragmatic, and skilled at catering to public opinion and sentiment. Of course, this personality has its drawbacks. During the refugee crisis, she gave in to public pressure and threw open the borders, which caused social turmoil in Germany. But most of the time, this was an advantage. During her term in office, Germany's unemployment and debt rates were always kept at a low level, and its economic development led the way in Europe. On the diplomatic front, she knew how to read the winds and navigate the currents, maintaining good relationships with all the world's major powers. Many years from now, German history books will surely have a chapter on Merkel. That was her era for a full 16 years. When asked how she wanted to be remembered by history, she paraphrased the epitaph of former German Chancellor Brandt.